Hi, hello, vanakkam, and welcome to yet another episode on Little Slaw YouTube channel. Today in this video, we are going to see about a new variable which is the random integer. We will see what is a random integer and the difference between the random integer and the other variables like counter, list, file, and also we'll see how to use the random integer variable effectively in a script. So before we move on, this is me, your Vasan Shanmugam. I welcome you all to Little Slaw YouTube channel. If you have not subscribed yet, please do subscribe to our channel, like, share, and comment your questions and your feedbacks in the comment section. So with no further delay, we'll go to the video. So first step, we will have to have a request. So here I have a get request which will get the product details, which is in the product ID 1. So now we will create a random integer and let's give a name for this. So we'll name it as random product, and here we have the parameters which is 0 to 100. So we can change this from 1 to 10 since we have only 10 products in our request. So we chose 1 to 10 and we have chosen on each use. Let me click OK and we will see how does this work. I'm clicking on apply. Let me change this to random product and we'll have an iteration of 3. Let's start checking. So here we can clearly see that the values have changed in a random fashion. So what we did is we have chosen the minimum value as 1 and the maximum value as 10, and we have iterated it 3 times. So we have got 3 different values for this test. So let's now make a change. So we'll have another transaction which is enabled, and we are not making any change. The random product where the minimum value is 1 and the maximum value is 10, and we are doing it in each use. And let's run the test again and see how does this work, whether it iterates or whether the value changes for the different page or does it change for each use. So here we can see, since we have used 2 transactions with the same random product, even then we could see that there is a repetition of numbers since we are doing it from 1 to 10. So let's now make a small change. So we will now go back and we'll disable the second transaction, and let's move to on each iteration, because since each iteration is the most used or the most common, but still we will try with one on each request. And let's see, let's do a quick check. So now when we used this option, which is on each request for 3 iterations, we have got the values as 2, 9, 2. Since they were totally random, that can be of any choice or any random value. And let's try with on each iteration and let's see how does this work. So here with each iteration we could see with different values which starts with 8, 3 and 9. So let's now enable the second transaction and let's do the same test again. So now we have 2 transactions with the same setup of each iteration with the minimum value starting from 1 to the maximum value of 10. And let's see how does the test goes. So here we can see on each iteration we could see that for the first iteration the value is 2, so the value did not change in the first iteration, and then in the second iteration it has changed to 6, and then in the third iteration it has changed to 1. So that is the difference between on each use and on each iteration. So when we select on each use, so which means in the first iteration or the first transaction the value will be different, and in the second transaction the value will be different, even if it is in the first iteration. But when we choose on each iteration, the value will change only after each iteration, even though you have any number of requests in the first iteration. Say for example, even if you have 10 transactions using the same random value, we will not see any change in the values. So based on the business requirement and based on our needs, we can change this value change policy and also the iterations. And let's see now what's the difference between this random integer and the various other variables. So the first variable that we take for comparison is the counter. So here we can see in the counter we have these options, which is the increment value, but in the random integer we don't have the option to set up the increment value. So random integer does not work that fashion. So random integer will choose in any fashion of incrementing or decrementing, but we have only two options, which is selecting the minimum and the maximum value. And then we have the scope, the variable value distribution policy, which gives us an option of cycling the values or stopping the test or returning the no value. So that option is not for the random integer, and we have only the value change policy. And that's the major difference between the counter and the random integer. So even though the counter and random integer looks in the same fashion, but this is the difference between the counter and the random integer. And then we have the list. So we know, so there is nothing to compare with the list and the random integer, since both of them work in a different manner. And again with the file, so file is mostly, we remember we have options to input the values through some files, but since here there is nothing like that, so we can choose the minimum and the maximum value. And let's see what's the maximum value we can choose. So since we can see here at one point of time we can give any number of values as a maximum value here, but see, we can see here that there is a message here that the minimum and maximum value must be an integer. So the maximum value we can give for the random integer stops with this number of digits. Same applies to counter. See, even we can see here I'm copy pasting the same value here. So the same value applies for the counter. So this is one similar thing which we can see between the counter and the random integer. So every value that you enter cannot be more than this boundary. So any value if you enter more than that, it cannot be accepted. So since this value has to be an integer, so this can be the maximum value that we can give as part of this. And so let's now check out this option, which is the predictable randomization, and we will do the test with this setup. Let me choose again the on each use, and let's run the test and see what does this predictable randomization gives us. So here we can see the values has changed, and let's see. So even though okay, let me choose this option. Sorry, I've chosen this. So let me choose this option and we'll run the test again. And here we can see, so we have chosen on each use. Okay, so let me choose this one. So let's see. So we have chosen the minimum value as 1 and the maximum value as 10, and the value change policies on each use, and the predictable randomization has been selected, and this is the outcome of it. So here we can see that for the first transaction it is 2, and the second transaction it is 6, and then again in the second iteration it is 2 and 6 and 2 and 6. So this is how the predictable randomization works. Let's change a few Let's make a few changes. We'll choose on each iteration and let's run the same exact test with two transactions with three iterations, and let's see what does this predictable randomization gives us as part of the testing. So here we can see that on each iteration with the predictable randomization, we could get for the first transaction it is 2, for the second transaction in the first iteration is 2, and then it is 6 and 6 and 7 and 7. So the values are getting changed, but in a predictable fashion. So this is how the random integer works. So far we have seen what is a random integer and how to use the random integer, and also we have seen what is the difference between the random integer and the counter, random integer in the list and random integer in the file, and also we saw how to use this predictable randomization with various value change policies. So with this we come to an end. We'll meet with another variable video in our next session. Until then, it's bye-bye from Vasan Shanmugam and Little's Law.